Ladies, gentlemen, and Haradrim of all ages, Diablo 4's Season 11 is starting later today with a pretty massive amount of changes to the game in general, and along with that it will shake up the general difficulty of the game and the feeling of each class interacting with it as well. Not to mention the new season-specific mechanics of Season 11 as well, of course, and so with that mentioned, let's go over the sort of predictive power rankings of the classes and talk about what will likely be their best builds based on a combination of knowledge from the PTR that was held a couple of months back, and of course the changes that we had happen in the patch notes since then that were revealed for the full finished Season 2. So of course a quick disclaimer to take this with a bit of a grain of salt just in case of unexpected changes or bugs, and a notice that of course the footage you will see on screen is from the public test realm, and it might not always line up with the exact thing that I'm talking about due to limited PTR footage existing and of course changes that have been made since the PTR. That said, I also want to say as we get into this that the balance between classes seems to be in a pretty decent state for Season 11. Every class should have at least one build capable of doing at minimum a pit tier 100, if not 105s pretty consistently. Getting started then, let's break in at the bottom of my rankings with Rogue at the bottom of the list, and this section will be a bit longer as I'll be explaining some things that affect multiple classes, but using Rogue as the example to do so. Rogue has some good stuff going on with Dance of Knives this season, especially with the new unique being added in, but this isn't quite enough to make it a properly meta competitive setup. It should be incredibly good for speed farming pretty much any content, but it has no proper pushing capability at this point in time. The best build for content based around pushing though, generally speaking, things like doing pit runs or tower once that is released, will be Death Trap. This is not a new build for the class of course, though it does have new reasons for being up at the top of potential power, which is mostly just the changed way that masterworking works. Now, masterworking ranks provide 1 extra % of effectiveness on each affix of a gear per quality rank, up to rank 25, so a maximum of 25% more effect from every single affix. Then you get a final upgrade that is a bonus 50% effect on one affix that stacks on top of greater affixes too. This build has multiple fantastic unique items that have uniquely powerful affixes that you can't really get from other ways that can then stack their power through this system. Take Scoundrel's Leathers with its trap damage increase affix, you roll a greater affix on that to make it 50% stronger, increase that number by a further 25% from masterworking, and then another 50% past that from the masterworking capstone roll. Similarly, the Eyes in the Dark unique pants of an ultimate damage stat roll on it, you can do the exact same thing with that. Beastfall Boots, you can do that with a maximum resource increasing roll, which then directly translates to more damage through the unique effects of the boots itself too. And so just purely due to the power of some affixes on the uniques, Death Trap as a build is looking to be in a very solid place with the new masterworking system, giving it a boost, and of course Sanctification is a thing past that too. On top of that then there's things like Heartseeker, basic attack focused builds, those should be in a very solid place, and then Twisting Blades is expected to probably have a bit of an uptick thanks to the Blade Dancer legendary aspect getting a solid boost as well, on top of the same masterworking changes being an overall upgrade across the board. One thing worth mentioning as well is that on the PTR, any build that could scale with maximum resources was getting crazy damage and crazy bonuses because of the reworked Melted Heart of Selig, which on the PTR gave you an insanely large resource pool on top of the other effects too. But this has been reworked before the season goes live, and it now no longer will scale bonus maximum resource based on your primary stat, which is why it was so busted on the PTR. Instead, it now just flatly doubles your maximum primary resource. And it's important to note, it doesn't say plus 100, it says doubled, which in theory means it will scale with all of your other maximum resource increasing things too, so this still will be very, very impactful for any build that can scale off of resource, especially as since the PTR, they have removed the limiters to these maximum resource scaling effects that they had to impart on anything that did actually scale off of your maximum resource because of the way that this item worked before. So now the limiter is gone, but the actual scaling is down. The item is still very good, but it's probably not going to be used quite as much as it was looking like it might when we were looking at the PTR. That said, Rogue as a whole is in a good place. It's not awful by any means, but I do think it will probably be the bottom performing class out of the overall 6. Next up then, let's talk about Druid. Druid is looking like it will be doing fine this season, but nowhere close to the peak that it was hitting in Season 10. The loss of the Chaos perk system has dropped their top end a fair amount, same with Chaos Armor of course. The new unique that they've gotten this season doesn't really change much as far as builds that have proper power, but they did buff Grizzly Rage a pretty dramatic amount, both as far as reducing the cooldown of the skill a ton, increasing the duration and the damage reduction portions, and while you no longer get bonus armor for rank 5, it does now reduce the cooldown even even further, which is fantastic for any build that uses this ultimate skill. But of course, in return, they did also nerf the Rampaging Werebeast legendary effect, so more of the power is in the base skill, less of the power is in the legendary aspect, and then they sort of side graded the Rabid Bear aspect, which is now called Rabid Beast. It turns all direct damage into poison, but now it's whenever you're shapeshifted, not just only in Grizzly Rage, but it also loses the rabies spreading part of it, which probably isn't a massive loss. The end result is that not a huge amount has changed for Druid, except, of course, losing last season's seasonal powers, and that has dropped a bit of the top end out. The expected best build for Druid in high difficulty content for Season 11 is the Puddle Pulverize setup that has been either at the top or like second best since it was initially created with the addition of its specific unique. This unique is the one that makes Pulverize create poison puddles, gain guaranteed overpowers while you stand inside of them, and then you splash the poison from the puddles around when you pulverize while standing inside of them to make lots of poison damage. Past that, Companion Druid, Cataclysm Druid, and Boulder Druid shouldn't be crazy far behind in potency if you prefer those, with Cataclysm as usual being insanely good for speed farming purposes specifically if that's what you like to do. But Pulverize should be the clear overall top build and just pure power for the class for Season 11. The class hasn't shifted that much mechanically this season. The main changes are again just the loss of Season 10 stuff, but as far as specific like list ranking, I do try to take more factors than pure power into the equation, but for me the biggest thing that's next up from that is the variety of builds that can easily get level 100 glyphs, and especially how new those builds are, or at least how they feel. If a build that is the top build for a class has been the same top build for that class, or at least close to the top for multiple seasons in a row, I just start to get bored of it, and I know that I'm not the only one, so that is a part of why Druid is currently in this slot for me. After that, let's talk about Necromancer in the 4th place slot, and this one is quite fun. Last season was very Bloodwave heavy due to the Chaos perks allowing ultimate skills to also count as core skills, but that perk is of course now gone from the game because Chaos perks are gone, and so Bloodwave is actually looking more like the 3rd or 4th best build for Necromancer in Season 11. This means that we actually do have a bit of a shakeup. One of the expected top builds is something that we've seen a fair amount in the past already though, which is Shadowblight Necromancer, just fully based around the Shadowblight key passive and triggering that as frequently and powerfully as you possibly can. The main change from this build that existed in Season 10, like Bloodwave, it was using the Chaos perk to make ultimates count as cores, and that enabled using Soul Rift, the ultimate, as a main sort of applicator of Shadowblight procs itself. But now that that option is gone, it's going to play much more like earlier iterations of Shadowblight focused builds. That said, this season we have a newcomer to the top build options for Necromancer with Golem Necromancer, and to be clear, this is not the first time that a Golem Necromancer build has existed or been strong, but this version is fully based around the brand new unique for the class this season, which is called Gravebloom. This lets you have 3 smaller golems instead of 1 big one. They have increased damage that adds up to being more than 1 standard golem would have, and they also get increased attack speed and increased respawn speed for these golems too. This combined with the actual affixes on the item like Golem Mastery passive skill ranks and the masterworking changes means that you can really try and pump that number up in a way that will quite possibly make golems a competitor for top Necromancer build. Once you have all of your ideal gear in the slots and some good masterworking done too, it'll just take obviously a little bit more effort or time to get to that point compared to where Shadowblight will likely be. As well as worth mentioning that this received further buffs since the PTR due to the Hellbent Commander passive being changed to no longer require you to have 7 or more minions, meaning that you can now sacrifice your non-golem minions to give you more stats, which then transfer directly into your golems and make your golems even stronger, which should be a pretty big power increase compared to the PTR for this one as well. Next up, moving to 3rd place, outside of like unexpected super wild bugs or unintended interactions that cause like infinite damage numbers or stuff like that, the top 3 classes that we have on this list, any single one of them could end up having the strongest build of the season, and I want to make that clear. They were somewhat back and forth on the PTR, and the changes made since the PTR leaves them seemingly in a very similar position, which is to say that the rankings of these top 3 will be less based on pure raw power of a singular build, and more so the variety of expected super powerful builds they have, and the novelty of them, how new or fresh they feel. Instead, 3rd place I've got Sorcerer. A lot of people expect the Crackling Energy Sorcerer build to be the singular strongest build of the entire season, meaning it should be great for speed farming as usual of course, but should also have incredibly high single target damage, great boss damage, which makes it like the ultimate option to take into pretty much any bit of content, even stuff like the Pit or into the new tower activity when it is added to the game in January as well. The new unique makes this build even stronger than it has been in the past, or Sylvain. This gives you a bunch of bonus enchantments and bonus damage for not having defensive skills on your bar. This season they've also reworked teleport and teleport enchantment in a way that removes the sort of infinite teleporting that Sorcerers always used to be able to do as a baseline. Now you can get that back with enough cooldown reduction stacking and purposeful building it in most setups, honestly, but Crackling Energy can quite easily achieve full proper teleport looping, which then makes it not just the strongest build, but also the fastest build for the class, and it's above other builds by a pretty fair margin, seemingly so. But for the sake of mentioning them as well, Hydra Sorcerer is still in a great position this season. It lost the powerful scaling potential of Chaos perks, but now the Serpentine aspect does not have a mana cap on its effect either. Past that, you've got Frozen Orb and Blizzard focused Sorcerer builds, which are a little bit of a gap down from there, but still looking quite solid. In second place, I've got Barbarian, which is a very hard spot to rank right now. I don't usually rank classes or builds based on the concept of how easy they are to create or get to its max power, but it is worth mentioning that for Barbarian specifically as a class, they do have a massive edge when it comes to deep endgame, because as usual, it's because they have more weapons, they have more equipment slots. Barbarian can have 4 weapons, which means they can have 12 total item slots. This means that Barbarian gets to have 12 sanctified items, more than any other class. Rogue is the closest, but Rogue's general class power balance is a bit weaker than Barbarian, so Barbarian being stronger as a baseline, and then also getting to have more sanctified items than anyone else, means in a world where you get your perfect set of sanctification choices, perfectly upgrading to the exact ideal things you want on your items as well, Barbarian should be unmatched. But I'd be surprised if 1 in 1,000 Barbarian players ever reaches that point of progress, even if like 1 in 10,000 players can reach that point, but the potential is there, and that does need to be quantified and mentioned and talked about, which is why I have Barbarian in this slot. I think without that consideration, it's probably 3rd, maybe even down to 4th at a stretch if we count out all the sanctification stuff, but it is 2nd place because of that part of the equation. As for what's going on within the class itself then, the builds that are really looking to shine in Season 11, the big main one is Lunging Strike Basic Skill Barbarian, which isn't necessarily new, but just stands to gain a good bit of power this season at the very top end of things. For the most part, not a huge amount has changed here from previous iterations. Obviously, the loss of Chaos Uniques and Chaos Perks from Season 10 is a bit of a hit, but pretty much exactly identical to Season 9 versions of Lunging Strike builds, except once you get into the realm of Mythic Uniques, there is a pretty important change to this. This isn't in the footage because, again, this item and the skill honestly function very differently on the PTR, and on live servers, this will still give you double your maximum resource, which means it will still scale your damage quite a lot through something like Ramlodni's Magnum Opus, which you will be using in pretty much everything meaningful build for Barbarian this season, but that combined with the extra survivability from Melted Heart of Selig means that you can afford to drop Challenging Shout as one of your skills, and then you can replace that with something like the newly improved Hammer of the Ancients, specifically the enhanced Hammer of the Ancients part of it. This gives you increased maximum fury and fury generation, which can then be funneled into their basic skill scaling from your other uniques that fuel your fury into damage. Past that, Earthquake and Bash builds should be quite solid as well, and also Hammer of the Ancients builds are going to have a bit of a renaissance with the Hammer of the Ancients change and the patch notes that we just talked about. This of course can then be funneled back into Hammer of the Ancients damage itself for even further damage scaling. Not to mention, there was something that people thought would be a bug on the PTR, which was that Hammer of the Ancients scaling was working with Ramlodi's Magnum Opus, which is a sword that scales your damage based on the resource that you have, but supposedly only is supposed to have that effect apply if you are using that weapon for the skill. Hammer of the Ancients cannot be cast with one-handed swords, but was benefiting from that scaling, and the devs specifically commented saying that they want that to be a thing, they're not going to change that, so Hammer of the Ancients is looking like it'll be in a very good spot. Then finally, in the top slot for classes, we've got Spiritborn. Which build will be at the top for it is very much up for debate right now, but part of the reason for that is that it has 3 separate archetypes, not even just 3 builds, 3 full archetypes that are all in all just extremely powerful positions for Season 11. That said, Evade build is going to be the king of speed farming as per usual for this class. It is incredibly quick, it is very fun, but it's looking to be just strong in general, even for activities like pit and tower pushing. Where it will struggle a little bit, of course, is in the boss portions, but it should still speed through the rest of every part of these activities so fast that it makes up for it. It won't be quite as silly as last season with the chaos perks and stuff, but relative to the power level of the rest of builds and classes, it will still be near the very top. The other build archetype for Spiritborn that we expect to pop off is Kepaleke core skill builds. These have been on and off the big winners for the class since its release, with Quill Volley Kepaleke builds usually being the main example here. Kepaleke builds are made around the Rod of Kepaleke unique, which makes your core skills free to cast, but when you have maximum resource, you will use those resources on the next core skill cast, and they are guaranteed crits with massively improved crit damage based on the amount of resource that was spent. The scaling of this was nerfed heavily a couple seasons seasons back, then buffed back to a sort of baseline recently as well, but on the PTR this had its effect scaling limited due to the way that the Melted Heart of Selig worked, but with the changes to Selig, the cap on this effect has been removed again, so it's back to being a very heavy powerhouse build archetype, with Quill Volley being the standard version you'll see, but any core skill using the Rod of Kapaleke should be very, very powerful in Season 11. There is also an important thing worth mentioning, which is the new unique boots for Spiritborn, the Path of the Emissary, and these specifically have multiple core skill boosting affixes, including just a massive chunk of core skill damage increase or core skill ranks that you can boost heavily through masterworking and greater affixes too, on top of the item itself just giving free bonus casts of core skills occasionally. At the same time, they did completely rework the Jaguar primary spirit hull, so that is no longer the powerhouse of Kapaleke builds like it used to be, so the overall power level should be quite strong, but with the bulk of the damage from different sources than it used to be. That said, new Jaguar primary spirit hull as an effect is sounding like it has a lot of potential to be built up as the main focus of a build, potentially even rivaling the two we've just talked about, but the exact power it will reach is pretty uncertain until people are able to actually play Season 11 once it goes live, but definitely keep an eye out for that one because it definitely does have some promise. That just about does it for today then everyone, a ranking of my thoughts on the potential of each class going into Season 11, as well as talking about the builds that I expect to dominate the actual sort of top spots for each class as well. Obviously this is all subject to change once we are actually in the season, because numbers can shift and bugs can pop up, but hopefully this helps give you a general idea of which classes have a playstyle that will be interesting to you in Season 11, and what build you might want to work towards to start out with as well. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.